So, hello everyone, joining us from all the platforms. I am Mashal, and today's session is about how to pivot in strategic and data-informed way when it comes to product management. Adam Thomas will give us a talk on this topic, and I myself am very excited to learn about it. And now I'm just going to give you a brief introduction of who I am, and then we'll hand over the presentation to Adam. Okay, so I'm Mashal. I'm a PM1 in Product People, working there for over a year now. And I have an opportunity to work on many different clients, many different projects as a product manager, be it from B2B, B2C clients, and I have a degree in software engineering. I would also like to tell you what we do at Product People and what makes Product People so amazing. So just a bit about Product People. We do some unglamorous hands-on work of product management. We have 40 in-house product managers who are acting as interns in different companies. And we have a product management community of about 20,000 members. We onboard fast, align teams, and deliver outcomes within the time frame that we are given. Okay. And before I hand over the slides to Adam, I also want to get to know you a bit. By you, I mean our audience. So for that, we have two questions. First question is, how do you prioritize features for your product? And the second question is, what is the most important skill for a product manager to have according to you? You'll be given a few options. For those on Zoom, you'll see a pop-up where you can just choose the option. Others who are watching us on LinkedIn or Facebook, you can just write down the answer in the chat. And you've got a few minutes to answer the questions. And as soon as we have the answers, I'll share the results with you so that Adam also has an idea of the kind of audience we have with us. And if I talk about the first question, how do you prioritize features for your product? I think it depends on product to product. It could be a customer demand, and it could be a business value, but mostly I think people or product managers consider customer demand most, because they are the ones who we are solving the problem for. Awesome, we've got the answers as well. For the first question, 78% of people say it depends on the customer demand, and 100% of people, like almost all of them, say that it depends on the business value as well. For the second question, what is the most important skill for a product manager? Well, we have 89% of the audience saying communication skills, 100% yes, and then followed by strategic thinking and data analysis skills. Awesome. So thank you for all your answers. I'll now hand over the slides to Adam Thomas, who will be our speaker, guest speaker today. And we are hosting this event with partnership with Adam. Adam, welcome, and thank you for your time, and look forward to learning from you and your experience that you have had so far. So I'll stop sharing so that you can share your.
Howdy, folks, and welcome to Survival Metrics. My name is Adam Thomas, and I am here to talk about how to make change in a strategic, data-informed, and politically safe way. Let's get started. When I talk about making change is really important for product teams. The reason why it's really important is the work that we do is all about making better decisions. And because of that, I generally, when I talk to teams about how are they pivoting and what's going on, they often come around to these two questions. One, why are we stuck? And two, why don't we pivot? These are the two things that are core to folks being able to change. And so let's set the stage. I think the role of product management is really simple. but it's very hard to do, right? And the role of product managers are to create an environment where the team is consistently making better decisions over time. Super important because we work in complex environments. That's what makes us different from project managers. The difference between product management and project management is complex. There is no endpoint to what we do. Project management is complicated. There is an endpoint to what happens there. A way to make that clear is the difference between Gmail and a bridge. When is Gmail done? I don't know. That was in beta for 13 years. What about a bridge? We know when a bridge is done. It's when it can safely move cars across from one place to the other, or person, or load, whatever, right? This is not a remark on how complicated or how hard these two jobs are. Both of them are very difficult, and one of them is what we do, right? And since we have no endpoint, the ideas is very important. How we make decisions is very important. Ron Kohavi tells us that 60 to 90% of ideas do not improve the metrics they were intended to improve. That means 60 to 90% of our work is bringing zero value to teams. So it's quite simple. We need to change as soon as possible. As soon as we find out something isn't working, it is on us to change. Why? Because ideas compound. Every time we see a bad idea, anytime an idea hits in that 60 to 90% range, when you add another idea on top of that, well, things get really expensive, right? And so whenever each project is a lesson, each initiative is a lesson, when these bad ideas start to stack, they become a very expensive lesson. One example that I really like to point out is in 1994, Intel knew that they had bad Pentium chips. And when they could have made the change, it would have cost them $20 to $30 million to fix. They tried to escape it, and so it ended up costing them $475 million in a recall. So why don't we change? Especially when we know we need to change as soon as possible. And we need to create an environment where the team is consistently making better decisions over time. Well, two things that get in the way. One is loss aversion. It is a very human thing to avoid loss. In fact, it's how our brains are wired. We'll do anything to not feel this sting of saying we didn't do well. And the other one is sunk cost. On top of that loss aversion, we're very comfortable with throwing money and resources over things that are already done. Like we can't improve it. And so this is called the sunk cost fallacy. In gambling, they call this following good money after bad, right? We just keep staying at the table until our ship is sunk. And so that's very difficult for us to break through these very human emotions. And not just us, the teams around us, because as product managers, we do not work alone, right? A product manager is useless on their own. And so you got to deal with the sunk costs and the fact that even though it's easy to let things slip, long-term, the value and the power of our products are based on us. But for those who are willing to change, there's a lot of opportunity out there. For Slack was a gaming company, and then they realized that they were better as a chat company, and so they made the change. Nintendo was a card company, then they became the biggest video game company in the world. Twitter was a podcasting app. Now it's a daily grievance generator that people seem to like. All this to say is we need change as soon as possible. Now, I can't give you the metric. Usually when I do this talk and people come up to me afterwards, they say, so what's a survival metric? What's one thing I can take back? It's very similar to Stephen King's story about a pencil. People ask him, what type of pencil can make me write better? Doesn't matter, right? What matters is that you know how to write. And in this talk, we're going to talk about, before we even get to the metrics, a better way of writing, a better way of sensing out when you need to change. This is a talk that's designed to teach you how to fish, not give you a fish. And so let's start with the why are we stuck piece. Well, why are we stuck? Three things become top of mind. One is we don't have an anchor to guide us, right? We don't have metrics that can tell a story, and we don't know what our stakeholders want. So when you mix all three of these things, that's how people sit in the world of loss aversion, and they sit with sunk cost. They don't know the answers to these three things, and it's far safer, at least in the moment, to sit and let things go. And so let's talk about how you get unstuck. Well, we'll attack those three problems. One is you can get strategic. Strategy is your anchor when you combine it with vision. Two, you can get data informed, which is how you can use your metrics to track and evaluate change, right? It's not just there to use data. You have to be informed with it. You have to be able to tell a story with it. Last is being politically safe. How can you communicate change effectively to people to build trust? In the next few minutes, we're going to go over all three of these things, and I'm going to give you tools to get better and get unstuck. So let's start with strategy. We don't have an anchor to guide our change. How do you create an anchor? Well, first, let's get clear about what strategy is. Strategy is the opposite of planning. Strategy is the opposite of planning. Strategy is the opposite of planning. This doesn't come from me. This comes from Roger Martin, who is known as one of the godfathers of strategy. And the thing that I appreciate about this quote is when put in action, it bears out, right? Strategy is about act and react, right? And in acting, you might call it the pinch and the ouch. You need to keep moving. But teams think strategy is sitting in a room and planning, right? And so you end up with roadmaps, and roadmaps are not strategy. When you type roadmap into Google, this is what comes up. And for a fun game, for those in the Zoom room or those in LinkedIn or YouTube, type in the chat why this roadmap is terrible. I'll give you a few seconds. Why do you think this roadmap's bad? Or is it bad? So why is this roadmap bad? Well, there's a few things that really grind my gears here. One is there's so much to do, so many projects. Two, there's no strategic angle for any of this stuff. It's just a lot of stuff. Three, they're overlapping each other. So this is going to be a ton of problems in terms of actually delivering these things, right? There's a whole bunch of overlap for things that you can't move forward with, right? You have to wait for something to get done. And four, right? Because it's packed out for a year, you have no deviation, right? You've made a plan. And so really, this is terrible. The other side of this is the number one image result for roadmap in Google. So every time you're telling people and showing just with the roadmap, the people you're talking to type that into Google and they see this and they want a representation of this. It is our job as product managers to craft an anchor that makes sense, right? So without that anchor, right, you're not going to be able to change proactively. You're only going to be reacting to whatever happens. And when you see that roadmap, right, it's just a plan of, it's just full of reaction. So let's talk about ways you're going to be able to check on that strategy, to check if it's proactive versus reactive. One is WIP limits. WIP limits are the fastest way you're going to understand if you have strategy or not. The second thing is artifacts. Can people tell you the story of your vision from your artifacts? Do they understand what's going on? How is it affecting the work that they're doing? Because if your strategy is not driving decisions, then it's useless. Let's talk about work in progress limits. Work in progress limits are great because they act as a forcing function to keep people from going, yeah, we'll get to it. Yeah, it's in the backlog. Yeah, we'll get to it, right? We're forcing people to make a choice on what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. That's what work in progress limits do. And if you have a strategy, then you have an anchor in which you can base those decisions off of. This clearly has no strategy because it's all over the place, right? And so if I go to a stakeholder, or if I go tell a story with data, it gives anybody and everybody the opportunity to change direction whenever they feel like it, right? That is going back into the land of reactive. That is going back into the land of loss aversion. That is going back into the land of sunk cost. The other thing I talked about is strategy artifacts. And I want to spend a second here talking about Richard Rumet's Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. It's a really good book, and I highly recommend you read it. If you want to understand strategy, that's a great primer. It's a great way to get involved into the world. In it, he talks about a strategy kernel. And so a strategy kernel has three things that are attached to that strategy kernel. One is a diagnosis. A diagnosis defines or explains the nature of a challenge. And so a good diagnosis simplifies all these things, right? Good diagnosis allows you to make choices, not just you, but the other people who are looking at your diagnosis. Second, guiding policy. We do things like this because this is who we are. It's a guiding policy because it tells us, what are we good at? How do we move forward? What's interesting about us? How are we different, right? If you can't answer these questions in a way that you can tell people we do this over that, then you don't have a really clear guiding policy. And then last is coherent action. Coherent action is the next few steps. And so that's not to be confused with a roadmap with a year long out. That doesn't give us any room to go. But if you have no next step, then people are confused. And so it's really important that you're able to give a few things to get people moving in the same direction, enough for them to argue, because strategy is important for us because strategy provides heuristics. As product managers, as product people, right? We're dealing in complex environments, which means we are far closer to walking through a cavern, feeling our way through, than dealing with maps. And so anytime we can test that is a better way for us. And so first step, finding clarity through tension. Well, you want to create an artifact and pose a limit. What's the limit? I don't know. Well, what's going to happen is you're going to create a conversation. And that's going to allow you to bring tension into the room, right? There are plenty of ways to do this. You can grab, you can look at the past. The past is a great indicator of how much work you guys can handle. And you can look to the future. What do you actually want, right? And then you bring the right people into the room, which we'll talk about in a bit. But you can even start with just your product team. What can we do? What can't we do? And be honest, because this is going to lead into a story, which is data informedness, right? We don't have metrics that have context to the change that we want to make. So it leaves us sitting there and going, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. Let's talk about David Foster Wallace for a moment. David Foster Wallace has a fantastic commencement speech called What is Water? And to save you a bunch of time, the short of it is, there's an anecdote where he talks about three fish. There's one old fish and there are two younger fish. And those two younger fish are swimming. And the old fish comes by and says, hey, how's the water today, boys? The two younger fish look back at each other and go, what is water? And I think that's a perfect way to describe data blindness, right? As we work in product teams, we have a whole bunch of data at our disposal, a ton of data at our disposal. And so it isn't a matter of not having data, right? No matter if you're using Pendo or Mixpanel, or even just count or Google Analytics, or just counting things as they happen, right? There's data everywhere, right? But you're not using it. Why aren't teams using it? Well, one, people don't know the stakes around them, right? So people are working in their own world. So they don't know why they're using the data and why that data helps solve any problems. Two, speaking of problems, They don't know what problem they're trying to solve, what's important to us, what is going to help us move forward. And three, they can't tell a story with the data that you present them. And so, yeah, I don't know what I can do. We're humans. We live on story. And if I can't tell a story, then I go back to loss aversion and I go back to sunk cost. Right? People love OKRs. Much like that roadmap example, what does this OKR group tell us? A lot of it, it's a lot of stuff. I don't know what any of it means. And if I'm engineer number 7 and I look at this, how does this affect my life? It doesn't. It doesn't help me make any decisions. It doesn't help me tell a story. And so because of that, well, I'm just going to ignore it. We see this all the time with OKRs. And that's what leads to that hurry up and finish piece of OKR magic that happens at the end of every quarter, where it's 7% for 6 weeks, then it's 12% for a week, then it goes to 25, and then it goes to 80%. It magically happens every quarter, right? People don't know the stakes of that data on one end. And so the data you become data blind to it until somebody's standing over you saying that you need to get this done. And it magically gets done in every 2 weeks. So how do you understand the stakes from other people's perspective? Well, you go to your stakeholders and you ask them a few questions. Well, one, what are some non-negotiables for your team? We want to get this from everyone. You want to go understand what are the non-negotiables for each team. We don't work alone. And even within our product teams, engineering and design, we also have to go touch sales. We have to go touch marketing. We have to go touch customer success. It's really important to know what non-negotiables exist for them, so you aren't going down a path that you can't really solve. How much are we willing to let this cost us? Another version of this. We have an opportunity to do good work around, but if we don't know what teams are willing to sacrifice for the work that we do, well, we're going to run into problems. What markers do we need to commit more resources? This is a very important question when it comes to invest, which we'll talk about later. But there are things that are going to make people jump because it matches what they need to get done. So much so that they're willing to move other pieces in order to help you. So you got to go find that out. It makes your planning a lot more proactive instead of reactive. When you think about metrics, you also need a push and a pull, right? What's the problem? Or what is that problem trying to solve? Metrics need to have something pushing them. What's the problem, right? Because that's going to push people to look at them. Pull, what's the goal, right? What is the goal? Where are we trying to go? Because that pull is going to help them stay with it, right? It's going to help them keep that in mind as they're trying to get through a goal. So get a push and a pull. And lastly, think about a storytelling structure. And but therefore is one of my favorite new tools when it comes to telling stories because it's nice and simple, the ABT framework. And so what you're going to do is you're going to say, hey, I want to do this and that. That's your and piece. Then you're going to say, but I want to do this and that, but this problem is stopping us. That's the hard part. And then you're going to do your therefore. I'm trying to do this and that, but this is the hard part. Therefore, I'm going to do 1, 2, and 3. There's your 3-act structure. There you can take any number, any metric, anything that's super important, translate that into this structure. And then voila, you have a story. You have something that you can go tell people. And so the first thing I want you to do when you think about this is just to identify the stakes of what's happening right now. What's the most important initiative? And what happens if that initiative fails? Who's affected by its success or failure? And how does it serve the vision? Being proactive, thinking about this can help your next actions and help you build political safety, which we're about to talk about now, right? We don't know our stakeholders' incentive to de-risk change. Trust is 60% of a team's efficacy. This is from that famous rework study, the one that's known for psychological safety. If those around us don't trust our work, we fail. If I take 60% off of your test, there's no way of passing. And so you should always be asking yourself, everyone else is thinking, why should I trust you? So you should think about that question a lot as well. Because remember, our job is to create an environment where the team is consistently making better decisions over time. We cannot do that if we're not trusted. So why is there a lack of trust? Well, people are unclear on how the organization works. Do you know how decisions get made? A black box both ways, right? People don't know who's important, what's going on in product land, and product people don't know what's going on in sales land, marketing land, customer success land, all the lands, right? People feel like it's a black box. And then even if you have that, there's no way to show success, right? You need to have with the story we're talking about before, there's some translation work that has to get done to make sure that it hits the people that it needs to hit. So let's talk about decision making. Who in the organization influences the decisions? Ask yourself 3 questions. And if you have time, do this proactively. Take a pencil or pen out and draw up an org chart based on these questions. 1, where do decisions go to die? Who kills things, right? What is the worldview of the core group? What are the applied values on things, right? And then lastly, what do initiatives that get undertaken have in common? What works and what doesn't? Next, to get to know the organization a bit more, you want to shadow, right? You want to connect with other teams and be helpful, learn what is important and have a way of communicating. You're going to learn that communication by being with them. You're going to want to stay with them, right? And so, lastly, our success metrics. Since you're staying with them, you're understanding what's important. You're going to translate what's important to them. And then you're going to ask, how do we know this is successful? And we're going to show it to them, right? We're going to reflect the story that we made from being data informed. And you're going to use our success metrics to tell that story. What is important to the other team? Revenue. What is important, for example, revenue, or what's important to the vision of the company, or how will we know this works? Success metrics also means you're building the trust by telling people what's wrong and being open with what's wrong. So one of the fastest ways to destroy trust is to be right all the time. And so success metrics means you're putting things very plainly to other people. This did not work. And by being honest and proactive in that way, the research is clear here. By reciprocating failure, you build trust, right? Telling people about your failures. Far too many product teams hide this, right? And they avoid it by, not knowing the other team. So the easiest way of fixing this is going to take someone to coffee. 15, 20 minutes, just talk about what's going on, be proactive instead of reactive. And so we're talking about why this change not happen. Well, it's clear that you're missing the foundation of change, being strategic, data informed, and politically safe. So now let's talk about survival metrics. Survival metrics help a product team determine if an initiative is worth investing in, pivoting, or stopping completely. They are a forcing function to prevent product teams suffering from loss aversion and sunk cost. Survival metrics build on those pillars of change: strategy, data informedness, and being politically safe as a method to institute a language of change and a culture of change. Stop, pivot, and invest, right? Why don't we pivot? When we know that 60 to 90% of ideas do not improve the metrics they were intended to improve. And we know our job is to create an environment where the team is consistently making better decisions over time. And we know we need to make change as soon as possible. Why don't we pivot? Well, it's 2 things. It's a lack of repetition and a lack of language. We haven't done it before or enough. A lot of teams try to change, and it's like trying to change. It's like trying to lift 250 pounds on your first rep, right? Even if you're able to do it through some existential force or adrenaline, you're not going to be in a good place. We also don't have language, right? People don't have a clear dictionary of what things mean. And so the reason why we're going to use stop, pivot, and invest here is because they're very clear. This language will evolve as you do it, right? The repetition will bring that out because we need to change as soon as possible. We need repetition and language, right? If you're not doing repetition, you're going to have a high chance of hurt. right? And if you don't have a language, people are not going to understand you, which is going to lead them back to loss aversion and some cost. So let's talk about these things. Stop. It's really important that you have a kill list, a way to stop people from doing things. And a kill list is simple. It should have no rules. It should have rules for no wiggle room. It's very clear. We do not do this. Contextualize and clear so everyone understands. And it's clear that this is not acceptable. We stop everything. We don't do it, right? Next is a pivot. Change direction. These are things that lead us to reconsider the direction we're going. We're going to think about what are the incentives from others, what makes us question our strategy, and what risks exist, right? These things are going to cook in your mind as you're thinking about what you're going to do before a project starts. Lastly is invest. We have to take advantage. If we're not investing, strategy without investment is useless. We're being strategic in order to take advantage of things in the marketplace, which means taking advantage means we have to be open to moving resources from one place to another in order to take advantage. So you want to think about where you're uniquely situated. You want to be very clear about this over that. Remember, guiding policy, this over that. We do this, they do that. This is how we're different. And you want to get in front of the if I would have known question, which to me is one of the worst things I can hear from a manager, which means I didn't do my work. Whenever a manager says, if I would have known, which means it either means I wasn't being communicative and I didn't ask the right questions. And so it's really important to get in front of that to learn how to invest. So here's a sample, right? If the AWS bill is projected to jump more than 10% due to a production release, you'll need to discuss ways to lower the projected bill, or else the company will fail on our strategic goals to solve problems under budget. This is really important, right? AWS bill is projected to jump more than 10%. We have data here. Production release, we have a time, discuss ways to lower the projected bill. We have an action. The company will fail on our strategic goals. We tie it back to the vision of what we're trying to do, right? Now, if you're putting this in front of teams, you're giving them permission to, if they notice something, if anybody notices something, they can bring this up and we're going to go discuss it. The pivot action is meant for you to say, at our next opportunity, we're going to go discuss it, right? We don't need to discuss it now, but we're going to discuss it. Because remember, these lessons get expensive. If you're able to avoid a problem later, you avoid the problem from being as expensive as it is, right? Intel spent $1 billion in today's money. So when you have those metrics, you want to make sure that you repeat, right? This is working out, right? We have to keep working out. You want to remember Miller's Law. Miller's Law means our brains can only hold between 7 things plus or minus 2. And so if what you're telling people is not strategic, is not data informed, and is not politically safe, they are ignoring it. That goes doubly for the metrics you're using to implement these things. So remember, you want to make sure that you only have a few, 3 to 7 of these, and then you want to keep them useful. And that's why it's important to iterate. You want to keep iterating these things, right? They're going to change over time. Because remember, I can't give you the metric, nor can you give yourself the metric. You need to go out there and find it. And that's survival metrics, right? Survival metrics help us acknowledge that we don't know what we're making. We're working in a complex world. They help us create an anchor with the strategy that guides us. They use the metrics to leave a team data informed by telling a story. And it tells stakeholders, it makes us talk to stakeholders. It's a forcing function to talk to stakeholders and increase political safety, right? Why don't we change? Well, we need a 3-pillar change in order to change. And why don't we do anything about it? Well, we don't have a language of change. And that's what survival metrics is for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam. It was one amazing presentation. I am going to share back my screen, and we are going to give our audience some time to write down the questions they have. And so everyone, just to tell you, this was end of Adam's presentation. Now we're going to take some questions from you, and you can take some time to think and write down those questions in the chat. So while you write down the questions, I'll tell the audience a bit more about product people and some of the use cases that we work on. Okay. So as most of you already know, that product people work on interim basis in different companies. These are just a few of the use cases that in case you want to contact us. One is the interim fractional product manager or a product leader in case you need an interim product manager when there's a permanent position cover. Some product manager is leaving your company for a few months. That's where we come in. And we can also do parental leave covers, or if there are some urgent initiatives that you want to have in your company, that's where we also can help you run the discovery or the delivery process of those initiatives. Then we also provide consultancy as product coaches or program managers or product operation managers. We can happily coach your product management team, create a streamlined process of program for growth of the company and the product team in specific. Apart from that, the third use case and the very important one, which we work a lot on, is the product discovery part. We can help you discover the next impactful initiative of the product through market and user research. And we can also help you run a no-code pivot MVP. While I tell you about what we do, you should also know what we don't do so that whenever somebody reaches out to us, they know our use cases well. So we are not recruiters. We won't source candidates, but we are also happy to share your role with our community for free. We have a proper hiring process of product managers, and we have a team of 40 product managers, in-house product managers, who we outsource to different companies as interim product managers, which tells you clearly that we're not a freelance marketplace. Again, the reason is because we run a 360-degree feedback sessions after every 1 to 3 months for all the product managers that we have. If you're looking for a freelance marketplace, we can help you find a partner or recommend you a partner. Also, we're not a development or design agency. We purely deal with product management or product operations or product leadership. These are a few of the clients that we have worked with. These are just a few. There are a lot more. You can see the clients that we have worked with on our website. This is some of the positive feedback we have received from many different clients. And just telling you about the product people stats, we have supported 200 plus cross-functional teams. Up till now, we have 40 product leaders and product managers currently working in product people. And the most important part and the most interesting one is that 60% of the team is women-led, and 66% of the team is in the leadership roles in product people. This is our multicultural team from all around the world, and you can see that we still have vacancies open, which means that you can come join us and be a part of this team. We are hiring, and you can see the job openings on Greenhouse or on our website. We have an open role for product development representative, growth partnership manager, and junior account executive. With that being said, I'm going to take on some questions that we have. So looking at the chat and picking up the first question. All right, so the first question is from Sai or George. He is asking, how would a good roadmap look like? That's something that I was also thinking to ask. So Adam, what do you think a good roadmap would look like with strategy involved in it?
Great. So I think the person that's doing the best work around this is John Cutler. And one of the things that John Cutler talks about when he talks about roadmaps is the ability for differentiation and learning, right? This is a communication tool to help people understand your strategy. It is not the text within itself, right? And what I mean by text, I mean it's not the thing. A roadmap is a road to the thing. It's not the thing, right? And so with a good roadmap, I think having objectives that tie back to your strategy, I think levers that help you tell a story. And if that lever is a feature, or if that lever is an objective, if you have good OKRs in place, they're a great way of kind of sharing that. Also, learnings that are happening or what you're intending to learn. These things on a roadmap can start to tell a story to these other stakeholders that, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we're working on. Now, I also try to tell teams, you want to add this to a release plan, right? A release plan is where you get more and more to into the weeds of what's going to be released. You don't leave other people hanging in terms of like, hey, we have this, we're just going to work on these problems and learnings all day. And like, they don't get any understanding of what's actually coming out, right? And so this is where a release plan within a quarter, maybe within a month, that tells people what's going on, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, how it's going to be released, alongside with the enablement that is tied to it, right? This is when we really focus as product managers on helping these other teams get things that they can release. That's when that's helpful. Far too often, I see two people trying to combine a release plan and a roadmap, and so you end up with really not helping either. You're not satisfying either goal.
Could you give a quick example of such kind of a roadmap?
Sure. So actually, I might just pull John's. I have it as a slide. During my workshop, I go a bit deeper into this. See if I can find it in the next 30 seconds. If I can't find it in the next 30 seconds, I'll just talk through it. So I'll just talk through it. So an example of a roadmap that is good, right? Over the span of quarters, you want to have, this is our focus, right? You want to have some linkage back to, and since most of these things are digital, you want to have some linkage back to your strategy, right? Maybe just like a little like sentence or two that kind of gets folks in the mood whenever they look at it, that this is what we're going to do. This is how we're focusing. This is what we're focusing on. These are the problems that we're tackling, right? You'll also link out to a release plan. And then over the span of weeks, you'll say, okay, we're focusing on this. We're focusing on this. We're focusing on this, right? When you tie back to that release plan, right, that's when you get into the granular pieces of it. That's where you dig in to, okay, this feature is coming out here. This is what it's this is supporting the roadmap and this problem here, which supports this strategy here, right? It becomes a laddering communication. It's a communication that people can get as granular as they want, right? Which builds trust. But also, since people are tend to look at the roadmap because they're trying to understand what your long-term aspirations are, right? You give them that without being locked into these different features, right? Like that's how you avoid the problem that we talked about earlier, which is like, hey, I have a year's worth of things to do. I can't really change direction at all. I'm stuck, right? Also, I also want to add one more thing to this. This requires a bit of unlearning from your teams, which is what I hinted at during the talk, but I feel like I need to talk a bit more about. People have been looking at bad roadmaps for years. And these are roadmaps that come from product people who, unfortunately, think their job is to take orders. So they get a whole bunch of things that come in from the roadmap, from different stakeholders, right? And then they're playing Jenga. They're trying to create a puzzle. They're trying to make a puzzle fit with a bunch of requests. And so then what gets spit out is a version of that roadmap that we saw earlier. And a lot of people have worked at companies where this is the case. They also get rid of their product teams every year and they don't make the connection. they like every year, every 18 months, they get rid of their product teams that have that. And they don't make the connection over time, right? If you're able to build trust around solving problems, you'll last longer. I'll just say it's for your job security to make this change, because if you do it the other way, which is the way that everybody shows it, right? You'll notice that, within either you're not going to get promoted, or if you're in a product leadership role, especially, you're gone in 18 months, generally.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Thanks, Adam. Hope that answered your question, George. Another question from YouTube. Can you share more about the importance of political safety? Maybe a story from your own past fails.
Sure. So before I jump into the story, I want to make sure that we know that, that 60% of trust thing is super duper important. Far too often, product teams are stuck in a black box. I'll give you two anecdotes. One is when this is not going well. So there's a streaming service. I was talking to a VP of another organization at a streaming service, one that we all know, but it's not the most popular ones, but it's in that middle tier, right? And one of the things that she talked about was how the product team organization that she was working with, from the VP of product on down, had zero trust in the organization, right? They had a black box, and they would work with the CTO to solve things. And as a result, things never really got done, right? There's zero trust in the organization. Now, what that PM leader doesn't know is that for the most part, from what I've heard and seen, every other leader of the organization are quietly looking to get them out of there, right? It seems good at the time, but then you end up, again, I feel like that 18-month window, especially for product leaders, is the line, right? If you get past that, then great. If not, So on the good side of political safety, I'd worked with a team who's had problems between product and sales. And product is constantly talking about how, all sales does is come with a list of requests, right? Which I'm sure for a lot of folks sounds very familiar, right? All sales does is come with a list of requests. Sales goes, well, they don't care, right? Like, they always tell us no, and we're not selling anything, right? And so one thing I want product people to understand is back to the incentives for sales teams, right? They only make money when they sell stuff. And their leadership is based on the number. It's very, very black and white. And so when those sales teams are talking like that, they're talking about their survival. What helped change that direction, which lowered the amount of requests that sales gave to product, and it lowered the amount of things that were just being added to the roadmap, were a series of coffee meetings that I set up, where they were able to just sit down and talk to each other about what was happening in their worlds. Like, we're working tech, we're generally working with smart people. If you give them an understanding of where your world is and what's happening in your world, you'll notice people start to, like, the petty squabbling goes away, and then people start understanding, from a sales point of view, they might understand, hey, this is why requests don't work, right? They don't really necessarily add to our win rate. It's just a way for us to generate because we're nervous. Like, this nervousness is probably coming from the fact that we don't know our sales enablement stinks, right? From a product point of view, they'll start to understand, hey, salespeople are, again, trying to sell for their lives. They're trying to make money so they feed their families. Everything that we do, if we talk from a perspective of win rate, right, it changes the tenure of the conversation, right? If we're saying that we're going to do this because this helps you win more, right, salespeople are going to be lining up and they'll be your greatest supporters. And so for that, when you talk about just coffee, right? And both retention and the win rate went up for the win rate for that company went up about 15%, and retention, right? The sales team would just constantly leave, right? Sales team stuck around. And so there's a leadership win in terms of retention. There's a sales win because their win rate goes up. And then for product, they're not chasing down after requests or missing data for them to understand how their buyers are thinking. So it's win, win, win.
Thank you, Kuri. I hope that answers your question. Another question from Ganesha on YouTube. He's asking, what are the key or common data points used for strategy development?
Oh, I spent 2 slides saying I can't give you the number. That number is always going to vary based on the strategy that you're looking to do. In terms of developing strategy is when it's good, it's really 101, because I don't know your competition. I don't know your customer. I don't know your competitor. I don't know anything about I don't know the environment in which you're trying to sell, right? If I sat here and gave you, you should look at this, this, and this, right? Odds are, like, it's going to be too generic. It's going to be too generic to help you. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah,
I think the thing that a lot of folks miss with strategy is there's no silver bullet, unfortunately. You're going to have to make a choice to work on strategy or not. And if you're going to work on it, that means doing the work. That means making a choice about spending time learning about the competition, spending time learning about your customers, spending time learning about the environment, spending time learning about regulation. If you're working in like finance or AI, this is becoming really important, right? Do you know what the regulations are in your current country or the countries in which you're trying to sell, and how that affects your product development, how that affects your strategy going forward? Right? If you don't know that stuff and you're just building stuff because it sounds cool, you're going to get bit. And when you get bit, it's going to really, really hurt. Weight Watchers took a lot of data from kids. They weren't thinking about compliance. They were thinking about the data. They were just thinking about what's in front of them. The SEC in the US, which generally is lenient, has been recently turning the corner on AI. They made Weight Watchers not only delete the product, delete the algorithm, delete everything that touched the algorithm, and pay a substantial fine. Right? So, like, if you're working in AI, for example, right, it's really important. I can't tell you what you should be thinking about in terms of that. I can't give you some data. You need to go talk to the people around you to understand what's important and to cobble that stuff together.
Right. Okay. So, Adam, thank you so much. We are almost on time. I've got 5 minutes. I'll see if we have more questions, because most of the questions are related and you've already answered them. All right.
I see one in the Zoom chat. Ideally, isn't coherent action the roadmap? Marianne, I wouldn't say that the coherent action is the roadmap itself, right? I think it's a couple of, like, when I'm talking about coherent action, I'm thinking about like a week, 2 weeks worth of things to do, right? A roadmap is thinking about a long stretch of time. Even if it's like a quarter, that's a long stretch of time. Like, I can't tell you, again, it's like a cave. If I told you to, in a dark cave, if I told you to walk 50 paces straight, do you really want to trust that? Like, it's a start, it's a coherent action, but like, I don't, step 12, we might be on the edge of something, right? So we need to just adjust. So, far better to say, we have some light coming into the cave. Walk 7 steps, take out your lamp, and look around. That's going to be far more useful to you than, build feature X, which, again, features are, and I got to say this clear in the talk, and I want to just kind of implement this. Features are built on ideas. Features are a stack of ideas put together. right? And so if you have 90% of those ideas are bad, what is the feature going to look like if you haven't taken the time to stop and think about what's moving forward, right? And you might go, hey, this is hyperbole. All right, let me go look at your acquisition numbers. Let me go look at your utilization numbers. Let me go look at any type of data you have on customer or user satisfaction. And generally, teams that do not practice any type of pivoting or change, right? Your numbers are in the dirt. You're shipping stuff, great. But how effective is it? How good is it? Are you actually solving some sort of vision? Or are you chasing after a competitor for this week, and next week you're building this thing because it sounds cool, and this other week it was a hackathon that went off and you built this other thing, and then now you got 3 whole features that aren't connected that do what exactly, right? And so far better to get in front of those decisions as soon as possible.
Yeah. Awesome. Great point there. I mean, there are a lot of learning things to learn from you, Adam. Thank you so much for your presentation. And with that, we are going to end our event for today. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. And if you have any other questions, comments, please feel free to leave those comments on LinkedIn or YouTube, wherever you're watching us from. And let's meet each other in the next community event. Until then, take care and goodbye.